From the Gulf States newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm economic mobility reporter Stephan Bisaha, chopping it up this week. Election day tends to hog the political spotlight. But just as important is the time of year when state leaders who won those elections actually get together to pass laws, big and small, or at least try to. I'm talking about legislative sessions, those few months in a year when our representatives gather in Montgomery, Jackson, and Baton Rouge for sausage-making duty. Mississippi just wrapped up its session, Alabama has less than a month left, and Louisiana is just getting started. So to find out what happened, what is happening, and what could happen, we got some of our partners from all three states together to tell us what's what. First up, Mississippi. Will Stribling is a reporter with Mississippi Public Broadcasting covering the state's legislative session. Will, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Mississippi's legislative session ended about a week or so ago. I want to know, what's your one-sentence version of how this session went?
Republican infighting causes chaos, leading to major mistakes and dysfunction.
Justify, please, for me that word chaos.
Both chambers have Republican supermajorities, but leadership on both sides of the building had very different priorities, so it resulted in this kind of tit-for-tat where one chamber would kill legislation important to the other side, so that made certain policy issues more contentious than they would have been otherwise, and led to some pretty wild political games that I'm sure we'll talk about shortly.
Yeah, why wait? I mean, the big one that caught a lot of attention was how, the legislature did vote to phase out state income tax in Mississippi, but that kind of got overshadowed by this apparent typo that helped make it pass. One misplaced decimal point, if I got it correct. What happened there?
So the House wanted a straightforward path to income tax elimination over a decade or so with no strings attached, while Senate leaders preferred a more measured approach. So with time running out for both sides to reach a deal, the Senate passed its plan, which involved tying most of the tax cuts needed to get to 0% to revenue growth when compared to budgeted spending. But because of a decimal point error in the bill, those cuts would be triggered by revenue growth of just a couple $1 million instead of several $100 million. When House leaders noticed that mistake, they realized that as written, the Senate plan was almost as aggressive as what they wanted. And so they took advantage of that opportunity to pass an aggressive income tax elimination plan and send it to the governor, who signed it into law.
No, I think it's fair to also not make this sound completely fiscally irresponsible because, this is not a case where the state income tax is going to vanish tomorrow. I mean, even with this typo, like you said, this would take about a decade for that tax to be rid of. And, there's just one economist I was talking to about this, and he predicted that slow kind of over a decade cut just wouldn't motivate people to move to and invest in Mississippi like lawmakers want. Does he have a point that, if anything, this is too cautious?
It always made me chuckle to myself after the bill was passed when the governor or lawmakers said that we've eliminated Mississippi's income tax. No, you haven't. You've set a path for us to eliminate the income tax. And yeah, you're right. There isn't a wide gap in the Gulf States region in income tax rates. You've seen patterns where one state cuts their rate and then another follows suit. Even if the plan does progress and rates continue to go down, if other states in the region follow suit, it'll be interesting to see who the winners are in drawing that kind of investment and population growth.
And before we move on to one of those other states that you mentioned, what's this I'm hearing about, the session? It's over, but it basically needs to go into overtime?
Yeah, like I said, there was a lot of tension and bad blood between both chambers throughout the session, and then lawmakers weren't able to agree on final figures for over 100 budget bills that fund Mississippi state government, and they adjourned without passing that budget. So in the Mississippi state constitution, it says that if lawmakers leave the Capitol without funding government, that the governor has to call them back for a special session. So Governor Tate Reeves will have to do that sometime before the start of the new fiscal year on July 1st to avert a government shutdown.
Okay, Will, you promised chaos, and you did deliver. Please stick around, but, it's time for us to switch over to my state of Alabama And for that, we have Andrew Yeager, managing editor for WBHM. Andrew, always good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you too.
Okay, so Andrew, same question for you. What is the one-sentence version of how this session is going in Alabama?
Well, I would say the word of the session is routine. We haven't seen any major blow-ups. The normal back and forth of legislators going about their business is what we've been seeing. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, there's a Republican supermajority, so as long as they can keep their caucus together, they can pretty much do whatever they want. And secondly, one of the big perennial issues that always causes a fight isn't on the table, and that issue is gambling. There was a gambling bill that was set to be introduced, but right before that happened, the Republican leadership said, nope, we're not going to do gambling. There are too many other pressing issues, and only so many days left in the session, so that pretty much got nipped in the bud for this session.
Okay, so not much drama, but I did hear that one big thing that came out of this session was parental leave for state employees. What is in this new benefit for new parents that work for the state?
Yeah, this actually passed the legislature and was signed into law earlier this month. It would give state employees, including teachers, 8 weeks off after the birth or adoption of a child, along with the stillbirth or miscarriage in those incidents as well. Male employees would get 2 weeks off. Governor Kay Ivey promoted this measure as being pro-family and pro-workforce, pointing out that it was seen as a way to make recruiting better and retain more people in state jobs.
All right, on the topic of children, another thing the Alabama legislatures did was approve a $10 billion education budget. What's in that?
Yeah, we're seeing this proposal make its way through the legislature. Between that $10 billion budget and some supplemental appropriations, we're seeing about $12 billion in state money going to education. It includes money for that parental leave policy. There's support for math, literacy, technology initiatives. But what's perhaps most interesting is that Alabama is considering changing how it funds schools. And by that, I mean that the current system is based on just a straight head count. But it often takes more money to educate certain kinds of students, think English language learners or those in poverty. So the state is considering adding some additional money based on groups like these.
Now, Andrew, I know you said the legislatures, they have played it safe this year, but come on, there's only at least one big surprise in there. You got a little something in for us?
Yeah, I do think it's notable what happened with what's known as Glock switches. These are conversion devices that can change a semi-automatic gun into effectively a machine gun. They're outlawed at the federal level, but you had many voices, particularly in Birmingham, calling for them to be banned under state law. Glock switches have been linked to several mass shootings. Well, lawmakers did pass a Glock switch ban, and the governor signed it into law. We've seen a couple of arrests already under the state law. And I think it's notable because Alabama is a very pro-gun state, and gun control legislation typically doesn't fare well, yet this measure went through pretty easily.
Okay, now let's go to our final state and reporter. Brooke Thorrington with WRKF covers Louisiana politics as their Capitol Access reporter. Brooke, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, okay, we know right now Alabama playing it safe. Mississippi went the chaos route. So same question for you, just worded a bit differently since Louisiana just started the session. What's the one-sentence version of how things are looking going into this legislative session?
I would say the governor's honeymoon is over.
Okay, so this is Governor Jeff Landry we're talking about for Louisiana. And what are the signs that the honeymoon is in that rear view mirror? And I'm assuming like this is the marriage to voters we're talking about?
Yes, and his relationship with Republicans in this red state of Louisiana. And what's this social media term we use on Facebook on the relationship? It's complicated.
Situationship, I think, is the modern term now.
Oh, situationship. Okay, see, that's what the kids are calling it today. Okay, but it's complicated. And the reason why is because we just had 4 constitutional amendments that he was backing that failed, and they failed by a 60 to 40% margin. And a lot of the Republicans here are probably looking at this like, this might mean I'm going to have a hard time in office. So not everybody's aligning with the governor right now. It's going to be an interesting session.
And on that not aligning with the governor's topic, I understand he's also fighting with people that aren't even in the legislature.
Yes, he is actually not getting along right now with our insurance commissioner. We've had an insurance crisis going on for quite some time here in Louisiana. Last year, the legislature passed 27 laws that were backed by Insurance Commissioner Tim Temple in hopes of driving rates down. Well, that really didn't happen. And so now the governor is going after his own transparency and more authority over insurance companies, and attorneys on tort reform instead of the making the state more business friendly, which has been the insurance commissioner's line of tactics here to lower insurance rates. And they're not talking to each other, and they're not coordinating whatsoever. They're both Republicans, so it's going to be an interesting showdown between the two.
Also, Louisiana is forecast to have a $194 million budget shortfall. We had these constitutional amendments fail, including one Landry hoped would help cover a teacher pay stipend. That failed too. So what's at jeopardy as, the state tries to fill this budget gap?
Well, the teacher stipends is going to cost $198 million. So they've got to come up with how to fund that. Basically, they're just going to have to do cuts across the board. And then also, just to add more chaos, is that a lot of federal funding, like every state is facing, the loss of federal funding. 20% of Louisianans are on Medicaid. It's one of the few southern states that has expanded Medicaid. And funding for that and other federal programs is all in jeopardy. So it's going to be a very interesting debate over budgets and what the final budget will be, because there's just so many unknowns.
All right, Brooke, as we just get started in Louisiana, I am wishing you luck. I want to bring back in Andrew and Will to talk about Gulf States gems. And this is a series where we shine a light on some of the treasures of our region. And since I have 3 reporters here covering politics, I got to ask, what is a gem that's gotten you through the legislative session? Let's start with you, Will.
I imagine this is a nearly universal experience among legislative reporters. During that period of the year, I'm eating a lot more fast food and microwave meals than normal. And luckily, I live just a couple minutes away from what I consider to be one of the best restaurants in Mississippi, an Italian place called Polito. It's fancy, it's delicious, and so, at the end of a long week, there are times I will just splurge on a really nice meal, and getting to enjoy that kind of gives me the boost I'm looking for every time.
All right. Well, thank you. Brooke, do you have something that's also along the lines of the comfort food variety?
Well, when we're in committee meetings, I miss lunch a lot. In fact, I've missed it today. So you got to have some Louisiana Zap potato chips on hand. But restaurant-wise, when you do get a break and you're not taking a nap, I would say Elsie's Plate and Pie.
What's so good about this plate and pie?
Oh, gosh. I always get the buttermilk chicken with red beans and rice. And I'm trying to branch out and get a few more, but it is one of the best restaurants. Every time I bring a friend here from out of town, they're like, are we going to go to Elsie's again? I'm like, yes, we'll go to Elsie's again. And they also have peanut butter pie, too. So,
I'm sorry to make you talk about food when you haven't had lunch yet, but...
Yes, that is cruel.
Well, Andrew, I don't know if you got a food-related one to add to the suffering.
I don't have a food-related one. I'm not actually in Montgomery, so I'll mention this as something that's sort of a nice diversion, a way to get away from all of the chaos and drivel that can be legislative reporting. It's at the McWane Science Center in downtown Birmingham. Just inside the lobby, there's this sculpture, and it's called Vulcan's Dream, and it consists of balls on a track, and they go down their paths in any number of ways. They strike bells and chimes and wood blocks. There's a loop-the-loop. And it's just the kind of thing that you get mesmerized by watching, and you can just kind of let your cares float away as you take in this sculpture.
That was Brooke Thorrington with WRKF, Andrew Yeager with WBHM, and Will Stribling with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. Thank all 3 of you so much for your coverage and for joining us today. This week's show was hosted by me, Stephan Bisaha, and is cooked up by the Gulf States Newsroom team. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your root.